All right, so you ready to dive into some more crypto legal stuff?
Always fascinating stuff, especially this Ripple case.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for anyone out there listening who holds any crypto, this is a big one to pay attention to. And, well, looks like it might finally be coming to a head.
Seems like it, yeah.
We're going to be talking about some expert analysis that came out predicting that this whole thing, the Ripple versus SEC case, is going to wrap up by April. So pretty big implications if that turns out to be true.
Huge implications, yeah.
So let's jump right into it. I mean, first of all, I guess, how can these analysts be so sure about this April timeline? What are they basing that on?
Well, it's not just pulled out of thin air, right? It's actually directly tied to what's been happening in the case itself. The judge has issued a scheduling order, and more importantly, both sides, both Ripple and the SEC, have filed for what's called summary judgment.
Okay, and summary judgment, that means.
Exactly. Good question. It basically means that both sides are saying, look, we've presented all the facts. There's nothing more to argue about. The judge can just make a ruling based on what's already there. No need for a full-blown trial.
Okay, so basically they're saying cut to the chase, let's get this decided.
Exactly. And the fact that the judge has allowed this, the fact that the judge is moving forward with the summary judgment process really does point to a decision coming relatively soon.
Interesting. Okay, so potentially big changes coming, but let's back up a bit for our listeners out there. Maybe not everyone is super deep in the crypto world. Why should they care about this case? Maybe they just use a little Bitcoin to buy a pizza once in a while. Why should this matter to them?
That's a really good question, and you're right. It's not always obvious how these legal battles actually affect the average person. But think about it this way. What if the outcome of this case determines whether buying that pizza with Bitcoin suddenly requires you to file some kind of report with the government?
Oh, wow. Okay. Start to see how it hits home a little bit more.
Exactly, and that's just one example. The real issue here is that this case could set a precedent for how all cryptocurrencies are classified and regulated in the U.S.
Okay, so this is about a lot more than just Ripple and XRP. It could have ripple effects across the entire, no pun intended, but
Yeah, I get it. And you're absolutely right. The SEC is essentially arguing that most cryptocurrencies out there, not just XRP, should be treated as securities. So that means things like stocks and bonds. And that would mean they would fall under the SEC's regulatory umbrella.
and Ripple's obviously pushing back against that.
Of course, they're saying no, XRP is a currency. It should be regulated differently. It shouldn't be subject to all these security laws.
All right, so let's get down to brass tacks here. If the SEC wins and all of a sudden there's this much stricter regulatory environment, what would that actually look like for, like I said, our average person who's dabbling in crypto?
Well, think stricter know your customer rules on exchanges.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly limits on which platforms you can even use to trade.
Okay, yeah, could see that happening.
And, like you mentioned earlier, possibly even reporting requirements for certain types of transactions, especially anything above a certain amount.
Wow. Okay, that's, I could see why people are a little nervous about this.
Rightfully so. I mean, it could really change the landscape.
I guess the question is where do you draw that line? I mean, obviously nobody wants the Wild West, total chaos, but at the same time.
Yeah, too much regulation could stifle innovation, absolutely. It's all about finding that balance, protecting investors while allowing this new technology to flourish.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's got to be the key here. So, okay, we've talked about what might happen if the SEC wins. What if Ripple wins? What could that potentially lead to?
Well, in that scenario, you could see it as a signal that regulators are willing to take a more hands-off approach, at least when it comes to certain types of cryptocurrencies. And that could potentially lead to, a surge in innovation, a lot more investment pouring into the space, just a more optimistic overall outlook, I think.
That's interesting. So it's almost like not just about XRP, but about how the entire space is perceived, almost like a green light, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It could embolden developers, entrepreneurs to really push the boundaries, come up with new projects, new applications, which ultimately could lead to more widespread adoption of crypto.
Okay, so blue skies, sunshine for crypto if Ripple wins, potentially. But let's flip the coin again. What if the SEC wins? What kind of ripple effects? There I go again. But what kind of changes could we see then?
Well, if the SEC wins, we'd probably see the opposite of what we just talked about. A lot more caution, a lot more hesitation, maybe even some existing crypto projects scrambling to adapt to these new regulations. Could even see some just shut down entirely if they can't meet the requirements.
So this really is a turning point. I mean, either way it swings, the effects are going to be felt throughout the entire crypto world.
Absolutely. This case really highlights that fundamental tension between innovation and regulation that we see in a lot of emerging technologies. And this decision, whichever way it goes, is going to shape the future of crypto. No doubt about it. It's a pivotal moment.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up, let's recap what we've talked about today. First of all, this Ripple versus SEC case is almost certainly coming to a head soon. Analysts are predicting a decision as early as April, and they're basing that on recent court filings, the judge's actions. All of that seems to be pointing in that direction. Second, we talked about how the implications of this case go way beyond just Ripple and XRP. It really could set a precedent for how all cryptocurrencies are regulated in the U.S., which obviously is a huge deal. And finally, we explored how this could actually affect you, the listener, even if you're just casually dabbling in crypto. So stricter KYC rules, limits on trading platforms, maybe even having to report certain transactions, all of that is on the table depending on how this plays out.
And I think, given everything we've discussed, it really raises an important question for everyone listening, and that is, how might this legal battle, how might the outcome of this Ripple case influence your own decisions about crypto? Whether you're thinking about investing, getting involved in the industry, whatever it might be, I think it's worth taking a moment to really consider that, especially as we wait for this final verdict to come down.
Yeah, good point. A lot to think about for sure. All right, well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Be sure to check back in because as soon as that decision comes out, we'll be breaking it all down for you right here. Until then, happy trading, everyone.
See you next time.